Okay, so let's go into the stages. So stage one in that sort of cloud space is that sort of rehosting, or is also colloquially known as lift and shift. Tracy, what's kind of your take on stage one?
This is the low-hanging fruit, especially if you have organizations that are pushing back, they're afraid, they're risk, they've got a real low risk tolerance. They believe that you can often help them to dip their toes in the water with lift and shift. The problem is that you're not leveraging any of the additional goodness of the cloud. Why do we want cloud? Well, we want to be able to spin things up, using auto scaling. We want to be able to decompose our applications so there's better resiliency for them. Lift and shift means I take it and I bucket it in whatever way possible, whether I put it into a container or I rehost VMs. People do this. It literally means that I move it. There is some rejiggering that has to go on when you do it. Lift and shift is never as easy as pick the pot up from burner 1 and move it to burner 2.
It's not a copy and paste, right?
It is not. No, it's or as we used to say
drag and drop.
In the olden days, we used to say it's not just an X copy.
Yes, exactly.
So I've now just told everybody my age. I've inferred it. The rehosting is a smart way to start. But when people rehost, the guidance is always, what do we need to do to improve this? How can we better leverage these competencies for you? Sometimes lifting and shifting is necessary if there is a desire to reduce the heritage data center costs. So it's all trade-off. It might be good to get you there so you get that first quick win, set your corporate momentum. It could have some values. But don't leave it there. If that application is going to be long-lived, don't leave it as though it has just been lifted and shifted if it's going to be a long-lived application, because you're not going to get any of the additional benefits aside from infrastructure.
Yeah, and you mentioned something interesting, the necessity part of it. I think this has come in probably handy for certain organizations when, for example, they somebody higher up at the CXO level makes a decision to close down the data center or move some of the data center into a managed service kind of environment, but the rest of the applications will have to migrate to cloud because they're kind of thinking of cloud. They've probably been on an event or a presentation somewhere and been convinced within an hour or something that they gotta change their strategy to cloud. So that kind of necessity is there. But we also saw more recently, this during the pandemic stage as well. So the pandemic years where organizations had to mobilize, they had to enable a remote workforce. There was nobody around to go into a data center and hot swap drives and failed fans and things like that, right? So the easiest kind of solution was to maybe lift and shift that particular workload into the cloud so it can kind of be remotely managed and so on. So that was probably the more recent reason why you'd kind of want to lift and shift.
I saw some of that, but I also saw during the height of the lockdowns, we were doing things to reduce risk as well. And so we had folks that went into data centers and we were very cautious about how we brought them in. So some folks actually dug in deep and stayed where they were, waiting until the dust settled, so to speak, waiting until lockdowns were over so that they could do that. I think it did stir the pot quite a bit. It stirred the pot a lot. Folks needed to go to Zoom. They needed to go to MS Teams. They needed to go to whatever, WebEx. So if they were a company that didn't use any kind of cloud before, they suddenly were using some sort of cloud, even if it wasn't hosting their applications. So if nothing more, the lockdowns did drive us towards cloud consumption.